So let's get in. Listen, we're going to finish up our series that we've been looking at on the book of Luke today, and we've been dropping in for the last few weeks at various passages and various moments when Jesus talks to his disciples about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. What does it mean when we say that we are a Christian, a follower of Jesus, a child of God? And we've seen a lot. There's a lot that he talks about in here, but there are two sort of big themes that we see in Luke when he's talking about this. First is that Luke is talking about that following Jesus begins with a life that has been restored. And what I mean by that is that it's very clear that both in the book of Luke and really throughout the rest of the Bible, that each and every one of us is born into sin, and because of that, we are broken. We are sinful by our very nature. And I always use the example, I didn't ever have to teach my children to lie. They figured out how to do it on their own. I didn't have to teach them how to hit their sister or their brother because they are born sinful, right? You see that, and that's what we all are. We're all born sinful. We're all born broken, but we also choose to sin. So we continue breaking ourselves because of our sin. And it's really if that's all that the Bible presented to us, it'd be a really dark picture. It'd be a picture of us being separated from God, and there is nothing that we can do to fix ourselves. There's not going to be enough good that I can do to outweigh my sin. And so the Bible, if that's all it gave us, would be pretty dark, wouldn't it? But it's not all that it gives us. It tells us that there is really good news, and the good news is that God sent His Son, really a part of Himself, Jesus, to live a sinless life, to live the life that we should have lived, and to live this life and then to die to pay for our sins, to pay for our brokenness so that we could be restored, so that we could be forgiven, so that we could be made whole, so that we could be made new. And all we have to do, it tells us, is that we have to be willing to say, I received this gift that you've given me. He's offering that. He said, look, I've paid for your sins. I've paid for your brokenness. If you will just accept this gift and give your life to Him, He will make you new. It's this moment when we say, you know what, Jesus, I have broken my life. I've messed it up, so I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to trust you. Here is my life. And that if we do that, He promises us that He will forgive us, that He will make us new, that He will restore us, that we will get to be His sons and His daughters. Several times in the Bible, this is called the gospel or called the good news. And it really is good news, isn't it? That I'm broken and I can't fix myself, but Jesus did for me what I could not do, and now I get this opportunity to be forgiven and have life and be adopted into His family. And if you're here today and you've never done that, if you've never come to that place where you realize how much you need Jesus, you've never come to that place where you said, Jesus, here is my life, you take it. My prayer for you, my prayer this morning has been that today will be the day that you just surrender to Jesus. Jesus, here is my life. You take it. I give it to you, and experience and receive His forgiveness and His life and His restoration. But I also want you to know, because there's another theme that we see here that's equally as important, and that's that really is that moment of giving our life to Jesus really is just the beginning. In fact, if all we do is just pray a prayer and say, Jesus, here's my life, and I want to be a Christian because I don't want to go to hell, because heaven sounds a whole lot better than hell, and that's all that we do, and we stop there, it's very much like a runner running a race and beginning, and when the gun goes off, they start and they take the first 2 steps and then they stop. No one gets an award for winning the first 2 steps of a race. Right? No one, it doesn't matter. I mean, you would look at that and go, man, what's wrong? Why would you do that? But unfortunately, many of us as Christians, we take the first couple of steps and then we stop. We take the first step of giving our life to Jesus. We may even take the step of being baptized, which the Bible talks about. We may even start coming to church and give a few dollars, and we think, you know what, I've taken the first few steps, now I can stop because I've done all that I need to do. But the second theme that the Bible shows us, that Luke shows us about following Christ, is that we actually follow Him. And by the very definition of following something, that means that what you're doing is that you are following something that is moving. If it's not moving, I don't have to follow it because it's there and I can just stay there. But if it's moving forward, then I have to follow it, which means I have to be moving. And part of being a Christian, part of being a follower of Jesus is that we are always moving and pursuing and following and doing and becoming more and more like Jesus. That God doesn't just say, here, I've saved you, now go do what you've always done. He says, I've saved you, now become like Jesus. Do the things that Jesus did. Say the things that Jesus said. Think like Jesus thought and be part of the mission that Jesus was on. You see, I believe that Jesus saves each and every one of us in part so that we get to be part of His mission in this world. That there is something that Jesus is doing, and what Jesus is doing is everything He can to see as many people come to faith, come to find freedom and forgiveness and a new life in Him, just what you have. And so what it means is that as a Christian, our mission, our purpose is to help as many people as we can to find life in Jesus. We are restored to restore this lost world. In fact, I'm going to say it this strongly, that you cannot claim to be a follower of Jesus if you are not willing to help others find life in Jesus. That's a big statement when you think about it, isn't it? I mean, that's like saying, listen, I want to say it because I want you to hear it. I want you to understand it, that we can't claim to follow Jesus, that I cannot call myself a follower of Jesus if I'm not willing to help other people find life in Jesus. That is the purpose. That is the mission. That is why we are here as children of God. Look in Luke chapter 5, verse 10. Jesus is talking with this group of fishermen. Simon, who some of you know his name is Peter. Simon, Peter's his Greek name. Simon's his Hebrew name. And then he has some friends, James and John, sort of some of the early apostles. And at one point he says to them, and look at Jesus, and says, and Jesus said to Simon, do not be afraid, for now on you will be catching men. And when they had brought their boats to land, what did? They left everything and followed Him. You see what Jesus is saying to them? Guys, here's what you're going to do. Here's what your life is going to be about. Here is the purpose of what you're living and what you're doing. Your purpose is to help people, to catch people so that they can find life in Jesus. You're going to become no longer a fisher of fish, you're a fisher of men. Your goal, your purpose, the reason that you're existing is to help people find life in Jesus. And you know what they did? They left everything. They didn't sell their boats. They didn't have an auction and get rid of everything. No, they left everything and started following Jesus on this mission, on this purpose, on this life of helping other people find life in Jesus. So this morning, as we finish the book of Luke, I want to look at 4 passages real fast. It won't take long. 4 passages that show us, that reveal to us, that help us know and understand how you and how I, as we seek to follow Jesus, can help other people find life in Jesus. And the first thing that I think that we need to do, the first thing that we see to do, is that you and I need to build redeeming relationships. Shortly after Jesus calls and invites Peter, James, and John to follow him, he meets a tax collector, a guy named Matthew, also called Levi. Levi's the Greek name, Matthew's the Hebrew name. After he meets him and he invites Levi to follow him, Levi's a wealthy man. He also leaves all of his wealth behind, all of his stuff behind to follow Jesus. But the first thing that Matthew does is he throws a party. And look in Luke chapter 5, verse 29. It says, and Levi made a great feast in his house, and there was a large company of tax collectors and others reclining at table with them. And the Pharisees and their scribes grumbled at his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" And Jesus answered them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick." So what does Matthew do? He gets all of his sick friends together. All of his friends that don't know Jesus. All of his friends that are far from God. All the people that he knew, all the people that everyone else in their society had rejected, and that Matthew had found friendship and relationship in. And he brings all of them, and he helps all of his friends that are spiritually sick, and he brings them to the great physician. He says, let me show you, let me take you, let me help you find the one that can provide hope and healing for your life. I've asked you through this series several times, and I want to ask you one more time. Who do you know that doesn't know Jesus? I mean, like, think of their name, see their face, think of the times that you interact with them, the times that you see them. Think of the people you know who don't know Jesus. And I'm asking you this morning, do you care enough about them to introduce them to the one who can save them? Man, we'll talk with people about the weather, about sports, about work, about politics, about all kinds of things that quite honestly are not going to matter in eternity. And I'm asking, do we love those people? Do we care enough about the people in our life who don't know Jesus to bring them to the one who can save them? I have a good friend who always says that people come to Jesus best on the arms of a trusted friend. Are you a trusted friend? Are you the one who says, you know what? Let me tell you the one who can save you. Maybe some of us need to start throwing some parties. Like your pastor is giving you permission to party today. All right? Be good about it. All right, don't get all crazy on me. But what if we started inviting our neighbors and our coworkers and our friends and said, let's just get together and barbecue? And you don't have to have an invitation or even give a sermon, but what if you invited people to come into your life so that they begin to trust you and know you, and you begin to care about them and they begin to care about you, so that when the time is right, you can invite them to the one who can heal them? What if you got involved with your school or your little league that your kids are part of, or some organization in our community, so that you can be a blessing to our community, but also so that you could maybe get to know people who don't know Jesus, so when the time is right, you can bring them to the one that can provide healing for their lives? What if we just said, God, help me be a blessing at my work and at my whatever, so that when the time is right, people know they can come to me when their life is falling apart, because I'll point them to Jesus. We need to be intentional about the people and the relationships that we build. And I know that some of you are thinking, man, listen, my life isn't good enough. I don't know enough. I don't have it all together. God doesn't need you to have it all together. This world doesn't need perfect people. It needs imperfect people in love with Jesus enough to love people. And maybe some of us need to start building redeeming relationships so that we can have the opportunity to tell someone about Him. The second thing that we need to do is that we need to be a harvester. The more time that you spend with people who don't know Jesus, the more that you're going to discover that there are people who are ready for Him, and they may not even realize it. Look in Luke chapter 10, verse 1. And it says, and after this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of Him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where He Himself was about to go. And He said to them, listen, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into His harvest. I want to ask you this morning, do you believe Jesus? I know we're in church, so we have to say, yes, of course I believe Jesus. I'm asking, do you believe Jesus right here, that what he is saying is true? Because what he's saying is that, guys, there are people who are ready to give their life to Jesus. The harvest is plentiful. I just need people to go. I love this picture because it reminds me of a tree that my uncle had in his yard. It was a plum tree. And every spring, the plums would come out. He took care of that, pruned it, fertilized it, did everything to make that tree produce lots of fruit. And so every spring, the plums would come out. And they would be so many, so heavy. He'd have to get 2x4s to prop up the branches because they were so heavy with the fruit that was on them. And I can remember as a kid going out there and eating plums to the point you got sick. Right? And I don't know why that was good, but it was just, I just have these great, just standing under that tree and just reaching up, and you didn't even have to pull the fruit. It was so ripe, right? You know, it was just so ripe. You just touch it and it would fall in your hand, and you would eat that, and the juice it was just amazing because the harvest was plentiful. There are people all around you. Isn't that what he says? Are we going to believe him? That there are people all around us who are ready, who need Jesus. They just need someone to go and tell them, invite them, bring them. But we'd rather talk about who won the game last night, or what some politician did, or fill in the blank. And maybe some of us need to, and I've asked you this, to open our eyes and our heart to the people around us who need Jesus. Maybe we need to start listening to people. Okay, I gave you some questions that I think we need to, or some statements, that we need to listen to. And people say something like, man, this is not going well. Or maybe they're going to say something like, hey, you know, I wasn't prepared for this. Or I don't feel like I fit or belong here. And they're not going to say those exact words, but that's what they're going to say. And if we'll listen to them, all that they're looking for, whether they realize it or not, all their answers are found in Jesus. And they're giving us this open door to tell them about him, and we miss it because we're not listening. Maybe some of us just need to start telling our story, just talking about what Jesus has done and is doing in our lives, how he's changed us, how he's given us hope, and just make Jesus flow from our mouth just naturally, just like we do all the other things that we talk about that are not near as important, so that people know when they have questions, when they're not sure, they know who to go to. Maybe we just need to have the courage to invite. Come with me. Come to church with me. Come to my group with me. Come, would you come with me and let me tell you? Because I'm telling you, there are people that are ready. It's a promise he gives us. Which leads to the third thing, that because there are people that are ready, we need to be prepared. And let me tell you what I'm not saying, because I think that when I talk about this, here's the thing that everybody says, not everybody, but a lot of people say, Stephen, I don't know if I can start telling people about Jesus. Is what if they push back, or what if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to, or what if they reject me, or what if they get mad, and we get worried about all these responses and all the things that we can't do, and we just do nothing. But look at what he says here in Luke chapter 12, verse 8. It says this, and I tell you, everyone who acknowledges me before men, the Son of Man will also acknowledge before the angels of God. But the one who denies me before men will be denied before the angels of God. And everyone who speaks a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven, but the one who blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven. And when they bring you before the synagogues and the rulers and the authorities, do not be anxious about how you should defend yourself or what you should say. For the Holy Spirit will teach you in that very hour what you ought to say. Now listen, I understand this passage is talking about persecution and the incredible persecution that those early Christians were going to face. But do you believe that if Jesus will give you the answer in the midst of persecution, he can tell you what to say when you're telling people about him? I mean, do you trust Him that He can speak through you even when your words are not perfect? Do you believe that He can get the message and the truth across even if you mess up and stumble over your words? I'm here to tell you God is bigger than you. He's bigger than me. He doesn't need me to be perfect. He just needs me to open my mouth and do my best and talk about Him. And I'm going to tell you how I know this works. I've told you this before. Almost every single Sunday, someone comes up to me and says, Stephen, man, thanks for the sermon. Man, God really said this to me. And they tell me what God said to them. And I'm like, I'm thinking in my head, I don't say it out loud. I'm thinking, that is great, but I didn't say that. It happens, and it's the truth. I didn't say it, but you hear sometimes what God needs you to hear, not what comes out of my mouth. I don't know how it works. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I work really hard to make sure that what comes out of my mouth is biblical and God-honoring and what He wants to say. But I'm telling you, God is bigger than me, and He's bigger than you. And sometimes we need to get over ourselves and acting like we have to have it all together and say, God, I trust You that You're going to guide me when I start telling people about You. I'm going to trust that You can take my imperfect words and get Your perfect truth across. I'm going to trust that You're bigger than me, because He is. And I'm asking you, are you prepared, not with every single answer to every single question, are you prepared to trust Him? Now let me be clear here, right? Like, I think being prepared to answer questions and knowing what to say and having some plans and thought through what the Bible says and some of the scriptures is really important. In fact, it's so important that in just a few weeks we're going to have a class, a weekend sort of class where class isn't the right word, a workshop is a better word, where we're going to help you learn how to share your faith. I pray that we fill up this room and have to figure out how to overflow because we need more room for it. Pastor Aaron's going to be leading it. You'll hear about it in a few weeks, but so we value being prepared. But the greatest preparation is me saying, God, I'm prepared to trust You. I'm prepared to trust that You can work through me, so I'm just going to jump in. I'm not going to sit in a chair my whole life. I'm not going to listen to other people talk. I'm not going to let other people do it. God, I am going to trust You. Will you trust Him? Are you prepared to try, to invite, to say, let me tell you about the one that can give you life because He gave me life, and just share your story? Will you trust? But it leads to the fourth thing, and that's simply this, that we support those who go. Does anyone know what the other book of the Bible Luke wrote? You can say it. If you say it wrong, you won't get kicked out of church. So just try. Anyone know? Acts. Thank you. Man, y'all are such a smart group. And so he wrote Acts. And in fact, I wish when the early church just sort of put the Bible together, they had put it in order. They'd put Acts and Luke right next to each other because they really do. One flows right into the other one because written by the same guy. And here's the thing that Acts tells us, though, right? The whole book is about the expansion of the church. It's about this, that group of 120 that was in the upper room, and God's Spirit comes upon them, and then it becomes 3,000 like overnight, and it just begins to explode and spread. And it's a story about how sometimes they didn't listen and God had to correct them and all this other stuff, all this amazing things. But it's the story about the good news, the gospel, the church expanding across the world at that time. And one of the things that you see in Acts is that there are people that are called to go across the street. That's most of us in here, by the way. Across the hallway, across the field, across the whatever, that every one of us has a responsibility to take the good news wherever we go with us, to tell as many people as we can about Jesus. But there are also those that God has called to go across the world. And that those of us who, especially in our country where we are so blessed and so many resources, that in addition to going across the street, we are also called to help and support those who go across the world. And as a church, every time you give, there are some things that we support that just come out of our budget, a percentage of our budget. We support a group of 5,000 international missionaries across the world. We're a part of thousands of churches that do that. We pool our money, and we get to send people and primarily to parts of the world where there are not churches, where there is not a gospel presence, right? And so we're part of that. We're part of spreading the churches that send about 4,000 missionaries across the U.S. and Canada and into Puerto Rico and other sort of our territories. And every time you give, you support that. Missions here in Texas, there's a church in Dripping Springs that we're helping sponsor. Feed the Need, Primera, Hope House, Crisis Pregnancy Center. This summer we'll be sending our first homegrown sort of missionary to the Ukraine for 3 years to make disciples who are going to make disciples in the Ukraine and see what God does through that process. Every time you give, you're a part of that. And I thank you for that. It allows us, and as we join with other churches, to really make an impact across this world. There's also a couple of times a year when we do extra offerings, right? I don't know what to say other than that. Where over Christmas we have what we call the Lottie Moon offering. She was a missionary to China, and so we take up an extra offering. Then all that money goes to help people who are planting churches, spreading the gospel across the world. Again, Aaron, you're sort of like the star of the sermon today, Aaron. Let's make Jesus and you're second, okay? Anyway, but he served on the International Mission Board, he and Robin did, for almost 20 years. And when those offerings that we give at Christmas time help support people like them as they spread the good news in far and wide places. Around Easter, we take up another offering. It's the Annie Armstrong offering, and it again goes to support missionaries and people in our country and in sort of the U.S. territories in Canada. And it's people who, again, are going and planting churches and making disciples, even in our own country, and even through that, reaching the world. And I want to show you a video as we close today. It's a video about some of the stuff that we're supporting, and come back up and finish up. But I want you to think about the fact that not only are we called to go across the street, we're called to, how can I support those who go across this world? Let's watch this and we'll finish up.
This is what the world looks like sometimes. Look at faces in a crowd, and it's easier to see the crowd, not the faces. It's the way we are. But zoom in to one face, one person at a time. And if you look close enough, you might see what we see. The girl who gets high every day before school so she won't feel anything. Or the just immigrated Chinese mom who teaches her kids there's no God because that's all she's ever known. Where the world sees a crowd, we see a person, close up. We're the ones who speak hope to them. We're the missionaries you send when you give to the Annie Armstrong Easter offering. We see what hope can do, and we can't sit still. Because this hope, it's the hope of the gospel. It's a powerful thing. It pushes us to leave whatever is comfortable. It shows the lost someone is looking for them. And it gives you and us a mission to complete together. In Puerto Rico and Portland and Montreal and Miami, in college towns and small towns and big cities, in every language, in every North American life, Jesus saves. We've seen it. And all he asks is that we, missionaries, churches, everyday believers, share what we have. Give to the Annie Armstrong Easter offering, and this is what happens. New churches start. Those who were far off are brought near. And together, we send hope.